Unfortunately for Kayla, her biological changes brought on by puberty have coincided with many development insecurities, and the start of adolescence is proving troublesome. For Kayla, her physical changes are creating negative social experiences at school through lack of confidence and self-esteem. Because adolescence is a cultural construct, any norms that are broken or challenged become the ammunition for other students' bullying or marginalization. This works both ways. Kayla is either not capable of fitting into social norms or feels a sense of superiority. If not addressed, she will continually lose all motivation and focus for schooling, be unable to effectively communicate with others, and runs at risk of developing future and emotional behavioral issues. Firstly, what physical changes is Kayla experiencing? Females experience puberty roughly between the ages of 8 and 13. In regards to Kayla, early maturation is a key biological issue. Because she is more developed than her peers, Kayla has experienced the 5 most common physical changes from puberty. They are growth spurts, development of primary sex glands, secondary sex glands, body composition, and circulation and respiration changes. All are common traits from puberty and completely normal. However, the early development of these physical features, compared to her peers, has led to reclusion from social activities and interactions. This is because the early development of puberty shapes relationships both socially and emotionally. This lends itself to negative body images and the fear of negative appraisal, which leads to psychological distress. It's this distress that Kayla is experiencing that is responsible for the excess consumption of alcohol, sexual activity, and smoking or drug use. So what biological changes are causing this? These physical changes are started from the endocrine system, where the slow release of hormones into the bloodstream allows these physical changes to be made to the body. In regards to Kayla, either her age or her first period have seen increased levels of gonadotropin hormone released from either her adrenal, pituitary, thyroid, sex, or hypothalamus glands. It is the endocrine system's function to regulate, produce, and monitor the amount of sex hormones released throughout the body. However, during adolescence, the dramatic stimulation of estrogen causes the nervous system into overdrive. Because of this individual variability, genetic differences also affect the environment Kayla has created and is the central catalyst in her behavioral responses or interactions. The creation of new psychological structures, aka her genotypes, in her behavior can only occur from biological changes from maturation. This is called behavioral genetics. When we look at her from a nature versus nurture perspective, what is causing this behavior? The biological changes, nature, or environmental factors affecting her adolescence, nurture. What can we do as teachers to address Kayla's issues? For Kayla, we can draw on behaviorist theory to address the issues she is facing with developing strategies or plans to manage her emotional and social well-being. For instance, we want to condition Kayla with positive reinforcements whilst she is still aware there is consequences. This is called operant conditioning. Positive reinforcement is achieved through meaningful and genuine praise. This is applicable to both encouragement and task completion. To avoid Kayla thinking this praise is disingenuous, providing concrete evidence to the class as a whole will avoid drawing attention to the act rather than Kayla herself. However, when we are using negative reinforcement, we do not punish Kayla. Rather, we remove the negative to reinforce a positive behavior. Other strategies include the REMAC principle, successive approximation, intermediate prompting, and prompted reinforcement for group work.
As Year 7 is a difficult period for all students, entering a stage in their schooling lives that will eventually lead them to finishing their entire schooling period. However, much like most things, the beginning is the hardest for most students, struggling to deal with the changes in school environments and changes that are happening within themselves at the same time during their adolescence as they approach or begin puberty. As Kayla has difficulties with their own peers that are around their age and hangs around older students, this can be due to her being more mature physically than her peers. leading her to a struggle in her social development. KAYLA's teachers also point out that she is suffering from cognitive development, as she complains about forgetting content and not being able to keep up with the classwork. Cognitive development. Short-term memory is limited with respect to capacity and duration. Researchers have also investigated how information is assessed from short-term memory. More recently, the very notion of short-term memory as a unitary system has been questioned. Many researchers now prefer the name working memory, which consists of three component subsystems, each performing a highly specialized function. Working memory is a multi-component system providing temporary storage of information for brief periods of time that can be used to support ongoing cognitive activities. The dominant conceptualization of working memory is of a system comprising multiple components whose coordinated activity provides the capacity for the temporary storage and manipulation of information in a variety of domains. With KAYLA struggling to keep up with classwork and remember the information from the class, it may be easier for KAYLA if the class were to be taught in a more strategic way to help not only KAYLA but students like her. Organizing the class lesson in a way that the information isn't too much that students lose interest, but short and qualitative, while simplified so students understand the material without the extraneous load of information forgetting the material taught. Another important aspect of short-term memory is the duration of information. Early studies by Peterson and Peterson, using what is now known as Brown-Peterson paradigm, showed that information is quickly forgotten from short-term memory. Subsequent studies revealed that forgetting was less a result of the passage of time than of interference caused by other information. The results confirm that the amount of information that intervened increased forgetting regardless of time. This result and others led it to lead researchers to conclude that forgetting is a result of interference rather than of time-related decay. Cognitive neuroscientists distinguish two organizational levels in the brain, the neuronal and cortical levels. These correspond to the cellular level of the brain activity that controls the transmission of electrochemical signals, and larger structural units that control complex cognitive activity. Neuroscientists' innovative use of imaging tools, such as magnetic resonance imaging, has enabled non-invasive methods for studying the brain. What can we do as teachers? I would aim to incorporate cognitive load theory into KAYLA's learning. This suggests that effective instructional material facilitates learning by directing cognitive resources towards activities that are relevant to learning rather than towards preliminaries to learn. Through these findings, I found that regardless of the amount of information that was trying to be taught to KAYLA, whether it was over an hour or over a few lessons, the main result would be in the interference to her studies. To shorten the class timing for KAYLA to minimize the time of interference of information in the classroom. These strategies may be a disadvantage to fellow students, as some students excel will be pulled behind due to other slower learners. This approach would benefit KAYLA individually, however, could potentially disadvantage some of the other students. In order to benefit all students, I think a suitable balance must be found, and I would be teaching KAYLA and all the other students off that basis.
As a teacher, I have the responsibility in the class to not only address but understand the biological, sociological, and cognitive processes affecting the development of my students. This can only be achieved by being proactive, flexible, and critical of the links between psychology, education, and my KAYLA history. Throughout the semester, there have been a number of intensive yet interesting concepts and theories that will assist me as a future teacher. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, so this aspect interests me the most. Personally, I had no idea that adolescence is a rite of passage and that it is really a social stage determined by cultural constructs. The social stage gives the illusion of rights and freedoms that, according to some theorists, should not allow them to make future life-changing decisions. The social aspects of learning are developed through peer scaffolding is going to be the #1 technique I hope to use in my KLA through intensive group work and group discussion. Moving to biological. These are the biological changes the body experiences whilst in adolescence. These are mostly marked by changes to physical development, appearance, and sexual maturation. This is different for boys and girls, which previously assumed boys reach puberty on average quicker than girls. For adolescents, this earmarks the development of reproductive characteristics readying them for adulthood. In history, students who are experiencing notable biological changes and find themselves bullied will be subject to a seating plan where the instigators will be subject to a zero-tolerant policy to meet the high expectations I set in my classroom. Lastly, cognitive processes, which in my opinion is the most complex, dealing with matters of the brain. I understand that adolescents are more likely to think outside the box and become abstract thinkers during this time. This is because brain connections are strengthened, increasing the speed and creating new schemas, learning. Also, the 3 stages of human memory are vital to the effectiveness of new information given to a student. Feeding into cognitive load theory, where simply bombarding students as a method of teaching is simply ineffective. As a teacher, I plan on breaking up heavy, intense workbook sessions with ICT technologies.
By learning different teaching approaches, I further understood the importance of cognitive development, which will be important in teaching my KAYLA music. The working mode, cognitive load, must be considered when designing a lesson plan, as extraneous load is wasteful information. This leads to ineffective lesson plans. When teaching music to high schoolers, whilst not all students will find the subject engaging and important, it is essential, however, to keep the lesson engaging and interactive with the students. As cognitive load theory shows, it is impossible for students to hold in every bit of information that is taught in the classroom. A way of overcoming the split attention effect is to replace some of the visual information with auditory information, as this reduces the cognitive load on people's visual working memory by also using the auditory channel, which has its own memory space. Since working memory has a limited capacity, instructional methods should avoid overloading it with the additional activities that don't directly contribute to the learning. As music is generally practically based, it is easy to get students to engage in the lesson. I'll attempt to plan a lesson using cognitive load theory to get the most out of my students. As an example, I'll plan a lesson for every student to learn their basic chords, whether it be on piano, keyboard, or guitar. By drawing the notes on the board that are needed for the basic major chords, whilst playing a recorded sound of the chord that they are trying to play, for the students to not only get used to the sound that they're trying to achieve, but also visually seeing what they need to play. This unit has been beneficial for my personal teaching pedagogy. As a teacher, I want to focus on simplifying and dividing the lessons into ways which the information is being processed in order to create a safe and supportive learning environment. Thank you.